Hey guys, what's up? Ombarus here, and finally this week the kids are back to school, so that means I got to work on my game a little bit more, and I'm gonna talk to you about my crafting ideas. You see, in my original prototype, I didn't have any idea for crafting anything. I had this thing called the energy to matter converter that was supposed to be like how you eat food in other rogue games, so you just had like these items that you could consume to get energy. And then I added this idea of creating missile from energy using this energy to matter converter, but that was basically it, and I didn't think of it as a crafting system, just using energy and recovering energy from stuff. But then I was thinking this week about how can I get this idea of changing ship and make it work, because in a previous video where I was talking about the ideas for this game,
I would like for the player to be able to switch ships. So you would start with a very small, simple ship, but for example, if you manage to disable like a space carrier from the enemy, you could board the carrier and maybe take over.
but then as you can see, I had some issues with it. I wasn't sure how I would do it without like making the player too strong or making it too difficult to change ship or and stuff like that. And then I realized, oh wait, I can probably use some kind of crafting system to make new ships. So it would require energy and maybe some hard to get components that are only dropped from ship that you can craft. So this way I can control what the player can, what kind of ship the player can have, so he won't be able to like board a bus that is way too strong and would make the rest of the game super easy. But at the same time, you know, he can get lucky maybe and get a really powerful ship at the beginning, making it much easier to advance towards the hardest levels and stuff like that. Or, you know, he'll have to make trade-off, like depending on what ship he managed to craft, he might have to go for a more stealthy route or a more aggressive route or something like that. So I thought that's really interesting. And so I looked at other games and how they implement their crafting system. Of course, I looked at classic like Minecraft or Fallout and some lesser known maybe games like Starbound and one of my favorite Fortress Craft Evolve. And I look at how the menu is implemented and what kind of like recipes and architecture I should think of to create a more robust crafting system that's a little bit more complicated than what I had in my previous prototype. So let me show you a little bit what I've gotten down this week. The first thing I did is implement the UI Mockup. So I added this converter button to my UI, and this pops up a menu here. On the left, there's a list of all the recipes you can create, and when you click on it, the top shows like what's required, what is going to be produced, and some kind of description eventually. And then in the bottom, all you have is just a view of your inventory for now, and the player can select whatever he wants to use to produce whatever he selected in the list. Right now, it's kind of interesting. I'm starting to have like a design pattern for all my UI. All my UIs are inheriting from something I called GUI layout base. And what this does is that it actually, on the ready method, it registers itself to something I created called the UI manager. And the UI manager just keeps a list of GUIs and a stack. And it connects to the signal on push GUI and on pop GUI. Right now, most of the GUI are of course pushed and popped by the player, but it doesn't matter because it could be pushed and popped from anywhere in the game. And right now what happened is that, for example, the player here is emitting the signal to push the GUI equip mount list. Equip mount list is just the name of the node here. It also passes a dictionary of parameters that will the UI manager is going to forward to whatever UI you want to display. So when you do the onPush GUI, it adds it to the list of GUI. It makes it visible. It calls the init, and then it adds it to the stack. And what happened in the init is, for example, in the converter, the init will receive the parameters that were passed in the event, And for example, one of the pattern I've been using is passing some kind of callback, so that when you click on the OK button, it will do whatever it needs to do to prepare the data, and then it'll send it to the callback method that you registered in the init. So for example, when the player receives the crafting result, it will just say the callback method is onCraftCallback. And onCraftCallback, what it's going to do is that it's going to call the crafting system. I decided to create a separate behavior for the crafting because I know it's going to become quite complicated eventually. And I wanted to make sure that it was in its own system so that I didn't get the humongous player node. So for now, the crafting is not that complicated, but I know as I add recipes, it's going to get more complicated. The basic principle is fairly easy. First, it reads all the information it needs from the recipe. Then it validates that the player actually selected in its inventory all the requirements for the recipe. And then it consumes all the resource by removing them from the inventory. And then it adds finally the thing that you want to produce in the inventory and uses some energy if needed. There's this exception for the energy, which is kind of a bit of a hack. But I think it's going to be fine. I don't think there's going to be more hack than this. Energy is just stored in a different location. So, why not? I've been hesitating about how to store the recipes for each crafting item because I don't want something too complicated. But then I decided that probably it should be an item that the player equip, like weapons and stuff like that. This way, it opens the opportunity for the player to equip more advanced crafting system that will unlock new recipes. And so if you look at the JSON, the player here now has a converter mount that for now equips the converter MK1. And in the converter JSON, I added this recipe. And it has a list of recipe here, and in each recipe has a list of requirements. So for now, for example, I can specify a type, and if I wanted, I could probably add like an item ID for a very specific item, or maybe eventually I'll support like wildcard so that you can say like, oh, you can use any item you want to produce, for example, energy, and after that, you have the produced item and how many of this produced item you want. And I think like this, I cover a lot of the bases. Of course, for now, it's very simple. It's probably not the final design. But the thing is that a crafting system is something incredibly complicated. And until I know more what I want to do with it, I think it's better to just keep it simple. For example, for now, I already know it's incredibly tedious to produce energy from hydrogen because every time you have to click on the converter, select energy, hydrogen, and then, you have to repeat the loop every time for every hydrogen you pick up. And that's incredibly painful, which means I'm going to have to work really hard on the UX experience. For example, make the color red when you don't have this item in your inventory, make it green when you have it, and also allow you to craft multiple items at the same time, probably change the layout a little bit, which is also means I'm going to have to work really hard on the look and feel of this UI, because unlike like the other menus that were like more of a dialogue with an OK and cancel, this is going to be really more complicated with menu windows, and I'm going to need icons for the recipes, icon for the description, a more complete description. Above that, I will also have to think about all the other recipes I want to put in. I mean, I have a general idea of how I want the ship changing to work. Probably I'll want to also add recipes for like making your own weapons, or how you're gonna generate some unique items and stuff like that. And I have to test this out. So still a lot to think about, but for this week I'm really happy with how it turned out, because this was the last big piece missing to have a complete game loop. So now the player has to go about, explore, find planets, shoot planets, gather hydrogen, use the energy to matter converter to get more energy, and then hopefully not run out. And if he runs out, then he's dead and he has to start over again. And so you have the complete loop now, which is great because now it's starting to feel like a roguelike, like an actual game. And next week, I hope I'm going to be able to show you guys a lot of the small fix and features that I'm going to be adding to really make this whole game loop complete and feel rewarding, even though we're still at the beginning and it's not that much of a game yet. I think we have a good base there because we're basically at where I was when I stopped working on my prototype. So from now on, it's going to be like all new stuff. And hope you had fun and see you guys in my next episode. Bye!